Okay. We're going to return the Wednesday, October 7th Board of Education meeting to order. Everyone, please silence your electronic devices, and we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Additions and deletions to the agenda since Friday mailing.
And a personnel consideration is the resignation of Sarah Lucy.
Okay. Do I have a motion for the additions? Mr. Hislop, Mrs. Burns, any discussion? All in favor? Motion's passed. I need a motion for the acceptance of the minutes of the September 16th, 2020 BOE meeting. Mr. McFerrin, Mr. Hislop, any discussion? All in favor? All right. We have no awards, honors, recognitions, or special presentations. No hearings and petitions for this section. Need a motion for one or all of the business considerations.
Make a motion for all. 6:1 to 6:18.
Do I have a second? Mr. McFerrin. Discussion for any of them.
Just thank you for the donations.
Yeah, there's...
We'll take anything we can get at this point.
Correct. 611, 612, and 613. Donations from A.W. Becker PTA. Looks like Latham Staples for middle school. And Abounding Love Christian Fellowship for the weekend backpack program. So that's all. Any other discussion?
610, soil and water conservation. I know we have a pamphlet here, but is there a few highlights that you'd like to draw out?
Sure. They, Mr. Schofield worked with A.W. Becker to their ideas to create some outdoor learning spaces. So they're working with this organization and received the grant to do some of that work.
Okay. Anything else? All in favor? Okay, you need a motion for one or all of the personnel considerations.
Make a motion for all 7:1 to 7:12.
We have a second. Mr. McFerrin, is there any discussion? No. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion's passed. 8 is informational items. We have none. Special reports. I have nothing to report. Any other Board of Ed members have anything they would like to discuss or report? We will turn it over to Dr. Bailey.
Hello. It's nice to see human beings again, other than the team that we've been working together with for the last few months. Welcome to our public. This past week we had quite an anomalous experience, and we were in preparation for last week's board meeting when the storm came across the Capital District, and seeing it cross downtown Ravena was really quite a sight. And we've talked before about what will happen to us when and if we need to close school, and how we would go potentially fully remote. And we've been practicing, obviously, our remote instruction since last March, and to some extent this year as well. And last Thursday and Friday would have proven to be an absolute impossibility to have done that. This was I called it an anomaly, but the number of staff and the number of families in the community that had no power would have made remote learning just not possible. So it's both a good and a bad thing, I suppose. What that does, though, for us, what's important to note, is that we began school by using some of our days, our emergency days, in order to allow some additional professional development for our staff. We're beginning a school year in a very unusual time, and we had a lot to learn. So we used 2 of our days prior to the first day of student attendance. And this past week, we've used 2 more of our days, which leaves 1 emergency day. Not usually where we'd like to be on October 14th. However, we really have been preparing for what will happen when we do need to go fully remote. In other words, the students that we have would continue their instruction, but they would all do it from home. What we know right now is our students in grades UPK to 4 do not have their devices at home yet. We purposely began school with the opportunity for them to learn how to use them. Going fully remote in March was very difficult and in many ways unsuccessful and in some ways successful. So we opened school with the devices for these children in class, and we eventually intend, for instance, if we had to close tomorrow due to COVID, we would develop a plan similar to what we did last spring to disseminate those Chromebooks to the families as needed. But our long-term goal is to be able to send these devices home with these children as well, similar to what we do with grades 5 through 12. So in the event that we close in the future, whether it be due to snow or another storm similar to the one we had, our hope is to be able to flick the switch and to go to remote instruction as needed. And our students are getting better. I was there in the first weeks of school watching our youngest learners work with a Chromebook and seeing them basically 4 weeks in, and the growth that they've had is very, it's amazing. They learn much faster than we do. So it's definitely a plus. As part of reopening schools, the state put in force many mandates and expectations for us as to how we're able to open this. We've seen classrooms, we've seen pictures of classrooms, 6-foot distancing, requirement of masks, hand sanitizing stations, space on the buses, the maximum capacity for classrooms and other spaces. And all of that has been intended to protect our students and our staff. That's our most important commodity as we open, as we remained open. And you've watched the schools around us and what's happened to them in the last few weeks. Some of them not only have had cases, some of them have forced closure already. One of the reasons why I say that is we made the hard decision to begin some of our fall sports. The Colonial Council made a decision together to go with the low risk sports, excluding cross country. And all of the medium and high risk sports, including cross country, have been moved to March sports season. And all the Colonial Council schools did that, so our students will actually have competition when they get to that point. And our low risk sports, tennis and golf, are currently in competitive stance. All the rest of the sports that would have played in the fall have an unusual permission this year where they are able to conduct practices or conditioning sessions. And the caveat around it is the school must invite any student who is interested in attending to attend. So in other words, it's not a tryout and a cut and only these students are able to attend, but any student who is interested in playing football would condition with the team. Students who are interested in soccer would condition with the team. And we very recently made the decision to reopen our pool, allowing our students to condition with other athletes. If you've noticed, this is the first time we've had the public in our meetings. And I will say, although they are a low-risk group, they look like a low-risk group. Anytime we open the envelope of our school to anyone from the outside, we are placing our students at risk and our staff. Our custodial staff will spend hours in here tonight sanitizing this room so that the students who are seated in those same seats will be safe. Likewise, all the rest of our indoor facilities are closed to outside folks because of our concerns around that. So I mentioned the importance of that because we have, the governor has extended his executive order about allowing public meetings to be held virtually. In other words, the group can either meet virtually or the group can meet in person and broadcast virtually. Anytime we open our doors while we're in this current stance creates a risk for our staff and students. And I think we do need to consider, as the governor continues to extend open meetings law rules, that we consider returning back to the stance of we don't want to invite the public into our buildings during the day or after school. However, the missing piece has been the people who are here want to give voice to something that is meaningful to them, and what we haven't done is we haven't been able to give voice. So I would say the balance is the only caveat allowing us to go back to virtual meetings if that's what we choose to do, is that the public needs to have a platform to give voice to their concerns. And I think, as Teddy showed me, there's 5 or 6 folks who have, topics that are meaningful to the students and the families in our community. So I wanted to have a discussion with the board about what we choose to do going forward. We opened up today because I also, it's important to realize that the governor's executive orders are almost perfectly timed with our meetings. They've happened around the 4th. And if you look at the calendar of our meetings, they've almost always happened on the 4th. So we've waited up until our meeting to know whether or not the executive order's been extended. The current executive order, which allows for public meetings to be held virtually, ends on November 3rd, which means the governor, again, is going to be making a decision the day before the day of our meetings. So if the board chose to go in this direction, one way to accomplish this task is, at the top of all of our agendas, Sue places the time and date of the meeting, which is required. Time, date, and location of the meeting, which was required. We could place a caveat if the board decided to continue meetings virtually, to place in there that contingent upon the continuation of the governor's executive order, and I don't know the number offhand, the meeting will occur virtually. In the event that the executive order is not extended, the meeting would be open to the public because it's required. But I do have an ongoing desire to continue to protect the students, families, and staff, if we can. It's complicated. Anybody who approached the building tonight saw all the signs. It was like a runway going into Las Vegas, all the signs of what they had to do when they came in. So I'm open to questions or comments.
How are other districts doing it right now?
Virtual. I was on a discussion with 26 other superintendents. 18 contributed to an email survey. 0 of the 18 who responded have their buildings open to any outside organizations or to public meetings at this time.
Back to virtual.
Some schools are still doing fully virtual board meetings, meaning the board members are at home and they're participating from home, and then from that the meeting is being broadcast. Some are doing it in person but closed session being broadcast.
Are any of them presenting a way for the public to give their opinions and their questions and concerns?
They are. Some are accepting emails beforehand, like emails to the board clerk. Some are accepting written submissions similar to the cards that Teddy has on the table there. Some are accepting phone calls, like a recorded statement or message, so that people are in their own voice being able to present. But they all, initially, they were fully closed, and they've all adapted. They've added, and some of them have experimented to see which works most effectively. I mean, what we know is, as a result of public comment, people are thanked for their input. And then it's a task of the administration to try and meet the needs of the people who make the comment. It's very rarely a discussion, and there's very, very rarely a response to it. So it always ends up being somewhat one-sided, which isn't gratifying, which the other methods kind of lend themselves to being one-sided, to be able to submit questions or concern to the board and have them heard in public would be very similar in person or remotely. Our next meeting is Wednesday, the 21st of October. The one after that is November 4th, which is just after the end of the executive order. So, I mean, we've got one that falls within it and one that's beyond the scope of the order right now. As we look at the numbers of New York, all of us have, all of us are what is it? What's that called? Quarterback? Is that sideline? No. Lounge chair? armchair quarterback, thank you, and trying to predict what Governor Cuomo is going to do next in his executive orders. And there is no way to predict. Looking at the escalating numbers in New York, there's the potentiality that he would continue the order because the concern of the spread and in the envelope of these public entities such as villages, towns, cities, and schools, that the exposure puts the rest of the organization at risk. So one would think that because of where New York is headed, that it would continue, but who knows?
Could we consider doing Zoom hearings and petitions?
Consider doing Zoom for the board members as well?
No,
to
just so that,
public comment?
yeah. That way there is a face-to-face.
Sure.
I mean, I understand that, as you said, typically there's no response, but it may bring back discussion to the board afterwards. But it allows an opportunity for the public member to be heard.
That's a good point. When Sue and I were discussing a little earlier, we discussed a few of the methodologies that other people have used, and one of our primary concerns was equity, because some people will gravitate right to it, right to Zoom or to Meet, and some will definitely want to put it in writing because of their skill level or the access. So I think whatever we decide to do, it can't be so narrow that it would prevent someone, but
Yeah.
that's a great
I think
thing.
either, if they didn't want to be,
Right.
if they didn't want to do Zoom or Meet or whatever, and they wanted to put it in email, I think that's fine too. I think we need to publicize where they should send those questions, concerns, inquiries, whatever it may be.
I think it's important in this uncertainty that there is a mechanism in place.
Yes.
Because the feedback that we received, whether it was through committees or subgroups or any place where we could seek outside information, did change the way we did some things. And so there's value, and people need to bring forward the concerns and the questions they have. And we've all seen where social media becomes the second platform. And we don't want things to take on a life of its own because it's allowed to fester and get momentum.
Right.
So a microphone or a straightforward mechanism where someone can be heard will always be my preference.
Yes. That's why we believe that if people, when people contact Sue, they usually do so via email or by phone. That we know that that's the most accessible for folks. That if we use that as the baseline for allowing access, that would meet that criteria, which is allowing people to be able to contribute and give voice to their concern. But we could add a third layer, which is something that is a little bit more vibrant, so they could do a little podcast of sorts. I think we'd be wise to consider time limit.
Oh, no, I think we'd have to follow the same rules.
The sheet
So
said,
if it's 3 minutes, whatever,
Yes.
or whatever the rule is, it would be the same thing.
But if we're going to go by Zoom, then the meeting might as well be by Zoom as well, because we'd all have to be sitting here with a computer in front of us.
Or one screen in front of us.
And I do worry there was an incident at another school district that I would hate to see us leave ourselves open, where things were said that were inappropriate and memorialized forever out there. So I think there's value in that face-to-face interaction, that one-on-one, so that the person who's presenting their questions or concerns has the ownership of it. And also knowing that we're hearing it all the same way at the same time. I think having an intermediary leaves things open for interpretation. It leaves questions about, well, I gave you my question, why didn't I hear it talked about? So I understand the concerns about opening up the auditorium in this way, but it's kind of like the cat's already out of the bag. If we were a district like others that hadn't already done this, we could continue to grow towards it, but now we've already opened that platform. And so now I'm worried that going backwards is a message that I have a little bit more concern about.
I don't think as the numbers continue to rise in New York State and
Right, that's a
neighboring
completely
school
different
districts,
subject, but
Yeah.
all things being considered equal right now, and that being the only variable, that's a little bit more challenging to justify.
Yep. We're a first, we're unique.
First is not always great. First makes a lot of the mistakes for everyone else.
Yeah, that's right, it's true. This one isn't actively a board vote necessarily, it's not a board action. But it does need to be, I think, somewhat of a consensus as to how we proceed. So if everyone gave voice, we can decide from there. We're just missing Peter tonight. But.
So the decision to have it open tonight, what was that based on? Just the fact that we have not been able to give voice for quite a while now? We decided we're going to do it this way, and then...
When we, because of the timing of where the executive orders continue to come out, we didn't know that it would be continued. The executive order ended the day of or the day before our last board meeting would have been, so we made the
assumption was it
decision.
would have been opened anyway.
Correct.
Correct,
By
if
law,
the
you have
executive
to
order
open
had
it.
lapsed, that's correct.
Wouldn't it have been reasonable, though, that if our public notice had already gone out, that it would have been okay for us just to pick up at the next one if that changed?
Nobody would question in this time period.
Right.
Nobody.
I think we should not anticipate what the next moves are more than reacting to them.
Right. I'd rather ask for forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
So, because now, I look at it and say, okay, one, the space is massive. The amount of folks that come, we could limit. We could say, we can only accept so many, right? So that way we can at least control that. But,
Yeah.
the question now is, how long does it take to prep this area to be safe for the students for tomorrow, right? So if we can figure that out and factor that in and say, okay, this is doable. It's unfortunate that we have to do all this, but it's doable. Then we still allow this format. If we all go to Zoom, then we figure out how we bring the public into Zoom.
And
But-
Brian, and sorry, just to jump on what you were saying, I know you mentioned that it was going to take some time to clean the space. Doesn't the space have to be cleaned every night anyways, so that the next set of students
It was
coming
cleaned
in-
before these people sat down, it's going to be cleaned again.
Yeah. So no matter, it's going to
You have to
have
clean
to
it
be.
twice.
So it says get cleaned twice
Right.
now.
So do before and after. So
Yeah.
it's like-
Yep.
So if we keep that, if we're saying that that's it, we have to do it twice every other week, and we can keep it safe for everyone, I think we have to consider that too.
I just don't see the purpose of meeting in person if it's an option to meet virtually and it's safer, and sure, we're erring on the side of caution. I mean,
Right.
it just doesn't make sense to me to take any risk bringing all those folks together who are out in the world in different places. And I'm sure you all saw the news. My school had a case yesterday. I was not one of the people contacted, fortunately, but who knows? Who knows who will be? So if we don't have to, we did virtual meetings and they were very successful. We could easily bring the public in because you have control of the virtual meeting. You can invite in one guest at a time to, ask their question or address the board or whatever. I don't see why we wouldn't continue it as long as they let us, if it's an option and if it's safer.
I think it's just a matter of the back and forth, right? I mean, we could go virtual next meeting, and then the meeting after that have to go back to public.
Mhm.
It's all depends.
Possible, but it's unlikely with the way the numbers are going.
So really, up until our choice to come back in person in the library the last few meetings was ahead of schedule, right? Other districts are still completely doing things online?
Some of them are.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that for me, if we are going to continue to meet in person as a board, then I believe that there's value in the participants being involved also. If we're going to go remote, then we all go remote. I think that the halfway of it's okay for us to be in person, but not value the community input, that's an area I don't want to have to tightrope.
But then also, if we go to Zoom and totally remote, finding a way to allow the public to Zoom in and speak.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can do up to 100 participants at a meeting on Zoom now, and the moderator or the owner of the meeting has total control.
Right.
You can let them in one at a time, you can let them all in as you want.
Right.
Right. And if someone doesn't want to participate electronically, then they could still write something.
Sure.
But at least they've had the option to influence that decision on their own basis.
I think the only one that will put more work on is you, and yeah, that's why you get the big bucks. You control the meeting.
It would be easier to moderate a virtual meeting than it is to prepare this room, you know, and
Right.
before and after.
I
But
agree.
Yep.
we've had so much practice on the virtual meetings that it really it's pretty natural now. I mean, for us, think of how clumsy it was at the beginning, but we've gotten quite good at it.
So what do you need from us, Brian? Do you need a show of hands one way or another, or do you have a consensus where you believe we're going?
Tracy and Yvonne, your level of comfort for what happens.
What?
I said your level of comfort for what we do at our next meeting?
I'm okay with virtual.
Okay.
I prefer virtual, but I do think it's very important that anybody who has something to say is heard, and we have all the options available for them to do that if we do go virtual.
I think if we preserve the opportunity to participate virtually, by email, if they don't have if they can't participate virtually, or in writing, or by phone, that's four different ways, it covers the bases.
Absolutely.
Yep. Brian, what would be a timeline that's comfortable? Because obviously we do walk-in when
Yes.
we're in person.
Yep.
Is there a guideline of what you think would be appropriate for getting information to us if we were doing it remotely? You wouldn't want people popping in while we're in the middle of the meeting.
Correct.
Would you say 4 o'clock that business day, noon time?
We also talked about that as a scenario today. We said 3 or 4 o'clock on the day of the meeting is reasonable. That way, because we often have committee meetings that begin at 5. That would allow us to collect the mail, to collect the phone messages, if there are phone messages, or emails, and be able to deliver them to the board. We would use a format similar to this, which has a description of what hearings and petitions is intended for, what can be spoken about, with the person's information, which would also be shared when a person communicates something. So, thank you.
So how are you going to communicate the Zoom meeting information?
Yeah, the links.
The links?
Right, what would happen, we've traditionally been sending out our agendas on Friday evenings, Friday afternoons, and on the agenda it states the date, time, and location. We would include the link to the meeting in that.
Okay.
The one thing that we would ask is probably that people have communicated with our office prior to that deadline time that they would like to join, because we can't, this is a formal way of requesting an opportunity to speak, so we would ask that people formally ask to speak and then create room for them so we know to let them in. There's a few things, as you said, Bray, there's some elements to it. That person could be called, that person could be invited through the virtual meeting. There are ways to, because we never know also exactly when that moment will start for us, and we don't want someone to have to wait for that to happen. So we can figure out a vehicle by which to make that happen. It will require a third party to help us, but that's okay.
So email, phone, submitting a form and dropping it off, I assume, are all options for somebody, and obviously those would be ahead of the meeting.
Yes.
So we would be well aware that there would be a petition for a particular topic from a person, right?
Correct.
Zoom, what stops someone from just going to the website, seeing the Zoom, and joining and saying that they wanted to bring up something at that point? So will we give them an option to click on a link there and say, I do have a petition that I would like heard? Is that something possible?
No.
Okay. So if they haven't done it in advance, then
Next meeting.
you won't give them a voice based on the list of names that you have in front of you. So I think we need to make that known to the public.
Yeah, it's also really important that you hear both sides. I am exemplifying the importance of allowing our public, our residents, and our families to give voice in hearings and petitions. Hearing petitions are not required. It is not a required component of public meetings. We, as a board, you've made a decision to include them in our agenda. So the fact that we weren't having them was okay procedurally. It just wasn't okay for the functioning of our organization. And like you say, the feedback is an essential component of what we're doing. So it is okay for us to say, here are our parameters, here's our timeline, you have to have it submitted by this time, and if you don't, you can go on the next board meeting.
Okay.
So we're okay, we're within our boundaries to be able to give some expectation around that.
So timeline-wise, next meeting is next week.
So on Friday, we would be sending out the link to, it would say that the meeting was virtual. It would have all of the vehicles by which someone could submit their hearings and petitions, and it would let them know the format by which that would happen. And if it's by phone call, that's okay too. Sue is very excited to receive phone calls.
So we're moving next week's meeting to virtual?
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
And when's the meeting after that?
The 4th.
November 4th,
And when's the governor have to make his?
November 3rd.
So we'll know November 3rd.
And
So how are we gonna,
My guess is you could probably, the November 4th one could be under the guidance that
Correct.
they currently have, because you've already put out public
Right.
notice.
ask
so
for-
November 4th has to be public unless he changes it on
No.
November 3rd.
No.
No.
It has to be virtual, because
We stick with the
notify them.
virtual. If he changes it on the 3rd, we stick with virtual, and then we declare it that night, that'll then be in the public
Public
moving
the
forward.
next time.
We have to give 24 hours notice.
Well, it says 24 hours notice when possible, and
Yep.
what we would do is we would give notice of the meeting with all the same caveats that we'll do this Friday. In other words, all the venues by which someone can participate and contribute. And we would put on there in concert or in adherence with the governor's executive order, which expires November 3rd. In the event that it's not renewed, the meeting will be in person. We put all of that information on there, so the whole first page will be that, but so that people know that if in the event that we're not remote, that they're welcome to come to the building and we'd be in a similar venue. He has either done it on the day it expires or the day after it expires, just to be mean, I think. So we may be on that, in that day, having to make that decision. What we would share that
We're
with
gonna be
you.
within 24 hours no matter what. Either the day of or the day after.
I would say
right?
once you put the notice out.
Yep.
That's it.
Too
We're
bad,
locked-
that's
we're
the way
locked
we're
in.
doing it.
For that
If he
meeting.
changes his thing, then we'll make it the next time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's what I think that.
It's too late.
Yeah.
The mitigating circumstance is if the governor does not extend the order, which expires November 3rd, we would be in violation of public meeting law if we were virtual on the 4th. That's why I say that.
I think they
If we
got
already put the notice out that they
Yep.
require us to put out in advance, I don't think we would be in violation.
I'll ask our attorneys and we'll be able to. Thank you for
That's our
suggesting that.
saving grace.
And again, I can't see us being penalized for trying to give people timely notice and then immediately correct after that.
Sure. Good suggestion, thank you. I very much appreciate
Are we
that.
just gonna leave this as is until further notice? Until the governor tells us different? Or just the
Oh,
next two
staying
meetings,
staying
or how are we
remote.
doing this?
Why don't we revisit it on November 4th?
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate your input.
The website.
I know Mr. Engelhardt will probably talk a little bit about our ongoing efforts with remote instruction and the continuing professional development with staff and other things that we've been working on. But I will say about complete remote instruction, we put out a solicitation last week. Remember, I think I mentioned we have about 360 students who have chosen to be fully remote and at various grades throughout the district. A higher percentage in south of the high school, middle school than north. And we put out a solicitation last week inviting people back, students or families who wanted to send their children back. Of that 360 or so, we've had 43 students, families opt 43 students back in. This is, and I should also mention, between September and now, we've had 90 families, 90 students choose to go out on fully remote because they came to school and it wasn't the experience they had anticipated. So the good news, and we were supposed to close our invitation for people coming back last Friday. We had power outage. We reopened it yesterday and extended it through today. So, and we had a few more people request to have their children come back. The good news about it is 43 students coming back, spread evenly between K and 12, will allow us to do it. I mentioned numerous times that because of transportation, because of social distancing, because of our limitations of staff, that we, even in the reopening, we're on very tenuous ground about whether we could actually run school. I mean, we have a modified schedule, we have a shortened day, we have alternating cohorts and all that. That was what we needed to do to get the kids that we wanted to come to school to school. 43 coming back will allow us to continue to provide services the way that we have. We are looking toward 5 days a week and bringing everyone back. That's what we want. That's normality is what we're craving. But there will be some students rejoining us beginning the first week in November, which is earlier than we had originally said that they'd be allowed back. But the families that we did speak to spoke very loudly that their children were not thriving in the conditions they were in. So we're allowing to come back, some of them 3 weeks early, some of them a couple weeks early. It's important. So we're very grateful that families are staying involved and they're making that choice.
If you're allowing them back early, when is our next time period for when families can choose? Have we crossed that threshold of when we originally said you need to choose by this date in order to come back by X?
For the high school, middle school, we had originally said October 8th, which was last week, to come back November 7th, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then for the elementary, it was November 23rd, I believe. So the date was a couple weeks later. We decided to
But
move
October 8th was the date that they had to do it by?
They had to
So we're not
choose.
going to get, my question was, will we get more requests within the next month or so?
We may, and to be frank, we, even at the beginning of school here, we've made some in the play decisions, you know, especially for students, our most needy students, maybe students with disabilities or other needs, where we made a decision maybe in the second week where they had to. We weren't not delivering what we needed to. So we've been a little flexible, but not too much, because we couldn't. Because you go into a classroom, fourth grade's a perfect example, 15, wall to wall, rooms full. Fifth grade, 15, rooms full. So we couldn't have had a student just choose to come back. There wouldn't have been a seat for them on a bus or in a classroom. This has allowed us to say, okay, well, we know where we are. Some students have left, some students are coming back. The next time will be second quarter, which would be the end of January. And what we'll do is we'll probably put out the solicitation the end of December, and we'll see where people are. We wanted the break for quarters because it was a natural break academically as well. But the better we are at the work we're doing now, the more fluid we can be.
Brian, how is our attendance with the hybrid model? So I guess the way I'm trying to put this or think about this is we have 500 kids that are supposed to be in the high school per day. I don't know if that's the number or not. Do we get all 500 or do we get, 90% of them? I mean, I'm just thinking of, parents who have dentists and doctors and orthodontists and all these other things. How is our attendance for the people that are signed up for hybrid? I mean, I'm assuming parents of, hey, my kid has a, orthodontist appointment at 8 in the morning, but they go back home and still get the last 3-4 classes in remote. I mean, does our attendance still seem to be pretty good? And I mean, are there a lot of people doing that, or do we know that? Or
Mr. Engelhardt may have more to add, but I will say this is new to everybody, and families. I think from a teaching perspective, one of the things that has been a little unsettling is exactly what you've described. In other words, it's your son's day to be in school, and he chooses not to be. He's home because of whatever, legitimate reasons, right? And which a legitimate reason that would have ordinarily maybe made him miss an entire day. Instead, he's tuning in remotely. Not everybody's motives are as genuine. So I think that we've been working to try and set a balance for a few things. One is for conduct for students who are fully remote, because not all students are behaving the same way while they're at home. They're, as you would imagine, they're at home. So it's very, very difficult to put the school hat on, right? No hats in school. But the alternative is there are some students who are self-choosing to stay home instead of come in on the day they're supposed to be in. The teachers are developing lesson plans around the dynamics of who is in front of me and who's at home. If students are self-selecting to not be where they're supposed to be, I don't think we've had instances of kids coming in when they're not supposed to be there, but we certainly have had incidences where students are choosing to stay out. It's not best practice. It's not good for our teachers because they are planning for who is physically there. So we've been communicating with families individually when it's a chronic issue and trying to develop ways to both communicate what remote instruction and hybrid instruction looks like, because we all need a primer. We're 17 days in. The first 17 days were a guess. All the planning, 3 months of planning, and the execution is where we've really learned how to do, to balance the work of a teacher in a classroom who is teaching at home and in the classroom. So we want to share some models of what that looks like for our families. But also we need to send a message that on the days you're supposed to be in, unless there's a good reason like you described, you got to be in. You have to get on the bus and come to school or be dropped off.
I think you can clarify, and we can make clarifications. I can tell you, because I just did this today.
Yep.
My son had an orthodontist appointment at 8:50 today. He was remote until we left for the appointment. He was supposed to be at school, and then I dropped him off when he was done.
Yes.
That's so he missed less school
Than he would
normally do because of what I chose to do. But I think without really laying it out, right, for parents, hey, this is what you should probably do. Maybe they don't know. Maybe they think they should be remote the entire day.
Sure.
But we can start to lay out expectations, and it follows along suit with what I've been talking about for a couple of meetings now about, defining what hybrid model means, right? What are we expecting when you're in front of us? What are we expecting when you're not in front of us? Making sure that it's consistently applied through all the grades and all the classes so that parents can start to develop the expectation to ask the right questions when or if something were to not meet that expectation. I'm going to implore parents to dial into the remote back to school night and ask questions because I just feel like we're all learning, right? I said this earlier. Crawl, walk, run. We're still in crawl, right? We're learning, we're developing, we're trying to get better each and every day. But we can only get better if we start to develop baselines and expectations so that people can exceed them.
But you also have to keep in mind, you're only talking about 50% of the parents. The rest of the parents are not involved. They're not home. They have no say over what their kid does when they're home. I spend a good percentage of my class every day saying, Johnny, turn your camera on. And then, somebody left the meeting. Send them an email. You got to get back in the meeting. Oh, my camera's not working. Well, yeah, then you got to get your Chromebook in. It's amazing the percentage of time that I'm spending on just trying to keep kids involved, in touch, when if they were in class, it's real easy. But virtually, it's impossible because I can't say, I know your camera's working, just turn it back on. Because they don't. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the connectivity issues are, I don't know what the tech stuff is, and it's constant. It's the whole block, and it's not every kid. There's some kids that are there every single minute doing exactly what you ask them to, but there's a good chunk of them that know what they can get away with, and I'm concerned that one of them might be mine at home, to be honest with you, but he doesn't go where I teach. But the kids I'm working with, and it's not all it's just spread across the board. They know, the camera's pointed at the ceiling. Hey, put the camera down. I got to be able to see that you're there and paying attention. And if they're not, I send them an email. That doesn't work, so then I got to try and get on the phone or something. It's just.
I agree with you, and it's not easy.
And we keep going through this, and I don't think anybody understands until you're sitting there trying to do it. It is an absolute nightmare. You're working 10 times as hard, and you're getting a quarter of the result out of it.
Yep. But you're making every effort, right? And that's what we're hoping that everyone does, and it gets applied evenly. I have heard anecdotally about teachers asking students to sign off, giving them an assignment because they're not in person, and that's it. They get an assignment for the day. That's not what my expectation of what should be going on. There should be instruction. I'm not saying that it's perfect and that everyone's going to do it the same way, or that it's...
Well, I think you are saying that everybody should be doing it the same, and that's where I have an issue, because it's going to depend on the teacher, it's going to depend on their level of comfort with the tech, it's going to depend on the class. There's so many different variables going on that you cannot set one standard and say everybody has to be on camera for this amount of time, and some things work better not asynchronously. They just do.
What I liked, and I apologize because a few of us have spoken now, it could have been you, Bill. What I like out of it is if we instruct families on what the outcome should be, then the mode can be a little bit different. But I agree with you. For a good teacher is always thinking about outcomes, right? And it might look different in technology or in facts or in math or in science, especially, considering the nature of the work. That if we were able to say to families, what your child should be able to do is see modeling, ask questions, demonstrate their knowledge, and do further investigation, whatever that, with a little less mystery than what I just described. But I agree with you that we can talk about outcomes. What are the students going to walk away from, so that it's commonality between any of those classes? And then it allows for the teacher to say, there may be times when, okay, camera's off, work 5 minutes, come back, show me your work.
Yeah.
That's legit, right?
Completely legit.
But
And I think and I don't think that teachers do it the same way. And I'm not saying, I'm hopefully, I don't want it to come across, I'm saying everybody has to do it one way.
Sure.
But I agree with, if we set the bar for this is what the outcome should be, it will allow the parents to say, is that what my child, is that what's going on? For the involved parent or for, the involved student, they at least have an understanding of what should be going on, in that,
Right.
Before they ask a question, everyone says, I don't want to ask a stupid question, right? The way to do that is to start to develop an expectation, and then you can sit there and say, this is outside of what the expectation is.
Usually if somebody says,
I definitely agree, though, that parents need to have an understanding. So, some parents are home. I'm fortunate to be one of them. I'm pretty much the correction officer. So I will walk into either one of their classrooms, which is their bedrooms, and make sure that they are paying attention and that they're on camera and they're engaged. The problem I have is that sometimes when I do that, I'm told, well, there's no Zoom class. They didn't put out a link. I don't know if that's true or not. I have no way of knowing that. So the parents need to have an understanding that there will always be one, there may not be one, I don't know, right? So basically my expectations are all the work is done and I get no phone calls and emails from the teachers. That's my gauge, right? So I think the parents that are trying to make sure that their students are engaged, they're trying to help the teachers that are literally just going, turn your camera on, where'd you go? You got to participate, right? So if you have those that are trying to help, you have to give them the tools to help. And I don't think we have them just yet, And my students are both fully remote. So my expectation is that they're getting taught every day, somehow, some way, which means they're both yellow and green. So they're always in class remotely, so that's kind of the expectation that I have, right? And right now, it's going all the way till February. And I don't want them to slip, and I have one student that is simple, and I have one student that is not simple. So one sees a correction officer more often. Okay? So, and I think that's what teachers would hope for. They would hope that their parents are there helping them, get them in front of it. And to Bray's point, unfortunately, that's not across the board, right? So you need to set some expectations, not only with the kids that are home, this is what we expect of you, make it known to the parents, and then hopefully the parents that are home can help. The parents that aren't are going to get expectations that, hey, we're going to be making phone calls to you because your child is not participating.
we are across the board Google Classroom now, right?
Yes.
So my suggestion to all of the parents is what we do is go into the kids' Google Classroom. You can tell what's missing, you can tell what's assigned.
Yep.
We do it every day, and that's the simplest way to see if they're keeping up.
Yep.
I mean, you're right, it's not across the board at all.
And it's probably a little bit late now, but with the virtual open house, it would be nice to hear from the teachers to say, here's what my expectation is.
Exactly.
Here's how I conduct the classroom. So when your kid is remote in this day, he might be on off because we do that kind of thing in the classroom.
But you get a small percentage of participation in that, right? So you need to get as broad as possible to spread it out. So you
No.
take advantage of some of them that show up for that.
No, understood, but based on what I heard on the voicemail, it's going to be recorded, so
Yep.
they can go in, and if you're not available tomorrow, you can go in and hear what the teacher's saying, so that you know, you can even, your kid says, I don't have class today. Funny, because your teacher said this is what they do every day, so you do have class every day.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it comes back, and it's not just, I think, remote people, it's the same thing with hybrid people.
It is,
Correct.
absolutely.
When you're going to see your kid and you say, well, I just logged in, they took attendance and gave me something to
Right.
do, and I logged back off, and you're like, so that's all you
over?
do? And you don't know.
You don't know.
You have no idea. So I think it's, across the board, and, kind of like, we have some of our, teachers and our kids are saying, yeah, we do this, we do that, we're on here for an hour. Then we have other teachers that are doing different things. And then we have other ones that are attendance, and that's it. So I think it's all over the board, but how do we communicate that to, parents and, so when we're checking in with our kids, we know whether they're, telling us the truth or not.
That's the perennial parental question, right? We use agenda books, we use all kinds of tools, and I would say we're a lot closer now to be able to monitor that than we ever have been, because we've always relied on what this child has written down, right? And we always have two children, so at least one of them, gets the things that we need. I know that Fred was furiously writing down while you guys were having that discussion, because he's been working with principals and with content specialists and staff on how to create that continuity so people are having a quality experience, maybe not the exact same one, but and I'm glad that you talked about open houses, because the first virtual open house is tomorrow, and I commend the high school for getting themselves together, because they had 2 days, some of them without power until Sunday, trying to figure out how to do this new protocol, right? So they've recorded some of those things that you've talked about. They're going to be sharing their expectations and what a day in the life of a child looks like in those classes. And the high school tomorrow starts at 6:30, and their plan is to share the link on our website and through Blackboard, sending it out in an email with families just beforehand so they can tune in. And it will be available after open house, so for the first time ever, in the event that a family has a conflict, they can actually see the same message that everyone else saw. So that's a benefit, although this is a different world. And then next week, Tuesday, both elementaries will be on the same night at 6 o'clock, similar format and a similar messaging system. They'll send out a reminder Monday night, and then the connectivity will be sent to families just beforehand on Tuesday, and then Thursday is the middle school at 6:30 with the same protocol. All of our staff have learned to do something new in order to provide this. If there's any group of professionals that's learned more this year, I'd love to hear about them. So I'm excited at the prospect of what families will be able to see tomorrow night. And hopefully everything goes just as planned. There will be times to see it in the event that it doesn't go just as planned tomorrow. One of the contracts that you've approved tonight, one of the additions was for Fetch Kids. Seeing the pickup and drop-off protocols at both elementary schools, both schools built something that worked out of dirt. And they managed to get 50 to 70 kids in and out of their buildings every morning within 15 to 20 minutes, hand to hand, because their elementary kids were handing them off. This software, which is very nominally priced, will now allow families, as I mentioned, to announce that they're on their way and announce their arrival. It takes out the human element of seeing a number, radioing up to a classroom, telling people to send the child down. We'll know when the family arrives, so we'll be implementing that over the next few weeks. It's not going to be an overnight. We want to give people time. We'll have conversations with them when they drop their child off. We'll hand them links so they can download the app And so they're perfectly comfortable with it before we really deploy it. But thankfully, the thing we have now is working pretty well, and the new thing will work very efficiently. We met last week with the teachers union to talk about clubs. I sent out a message to all families last week about clubs and the attestation and other things. We've waited to begin our clubs because we needed to know we could do the rest of this work, this rest of this essential work of teaching our children. We're to a point now where we are ready to say, okay, let's consider how and which clubs we can offer virtually, because there's no time for the kids to be in school after they're dismissed. But I wanted to update you and let you know that we've solicited staff to ask, here's our list of clubs, who thinks they can offer things virtually, what would it look like, how many students do you expect to participate, and we will be activating that by late October, early November. So we haven't canceled clubs. We are instead investigating how we're going to reinvent the clubs that are out there. Some of them obviously will be drastically different, and some of them will be just moderately different. But we do expect those opportunities for our kids. Fred's going to talk about social emotional learning and the mental health and the emotional health of our kids. Our kids and staff need this time to connect in a way that isn't about the textbook. All the families I've spoken to, you folks when I've spoken to you, you've talked about life is not the same for our children. Clubs are going to help significantly. So we're excited to get back to that. And the last thing I want to talk about was the attestation. We went to a new form of attestation last week with families, from going to one that they had to actively go to on the website to one that's emailed to those families in attendance every day. We started it last Monday, which was like October 3rd, and we started, 60% of the people responded. So about 700, just under 700, and about 300 or so, 350 failed to respond. On Tuesday, we launched a phone call campaign calling families who did not respond. On Wednesday, it went up another 10%. And we were going to do another phone call on Thursday, and we didn't get to do anything on Thursday. We're going to continue to call families over the next 2 weeks to get to 100%. When we get to the last week in October, if families are not completing the attestation, their child's going to be sent home. This is serious business. I started my whole... Say it again?
In the meantime, we're allowing them in? That puts every other kid at risk that did the attestation.
Yes, it's true.
So why aren't we turning them away right from the start? You can't follow the rules, you can't come. We have to protect those that do follow the rules.
I think you very eloquently described parental involvement, and I will not refuse to educate the children in our district. I'm finding balance. First of all, we also had a great conversation about the level of honesty in this. We want everyone to complete it, and we want everyone to be honest. We're still we're still conducting spot temperature checks in classrooms and on buses. We moved to the new attestation. We're working toward 100%. There are many school districts who aren't requiring the attestation in person every day. We've chosen to move in that direction. But I have a vested interest in ensuring we're educating our children and keeping them safe. I'm on both sides of the
Why
argument.
couldn't we send them to complete remote instruction for the day? If you don't fill the attestation out, send them home, say you're complete remote instruction.
That's what we will do, but we have families who work by the hour, and it could devastate them. I'm not undermining, I'm not underplaying the health concern as well. Please know that. But I'm saying that we just talked about, we have a populace that needs to be educated, and they don't all fully participate. We're going to teach them to fully participate, or they can't come. We're going to get there.
Are we as a district screening the ones who don't have an attestation? Not spot, but if they don't have it, are we at least getting a temperature on them? Are we doing anything to protect the rest of the school if they don't have that attestation on file?
Until we were able to move to the new version last week, we could not easily determine who the 360 or so were that didn't fill it out, because it was a opt-in, not a opt-out kind of thing. This new version allows us to see everyone who is a green group who didn't do it. That's the benefit of having moved over to that. As of right now, we're not testing every one of the students who said no. Instead, we're calling home and informing them, you need to complete this right now. And we were trying to offer a window. If we believed it to be more beneficial, we could end it this week and we could say sent home next week and not draw it out another week. But I've mentioned the attestation in 3 phone calls home, in multiple emails home. It's on the website, and obviously people are taking it to different levels of seriousness. We want to get to 100%. It's just a matter of to what extent do we go before we exclude students from school. It's
If an
balanced.
employee came in and didn't fill it out, what would you do?
We'd have them fill it out.
Or they'd send them home, one or the other.
Correct.
Same thing with a student?
But you can't do that, because
Yes, you
like
can.
somebody like me, I missed one day. I didn't get a phone call though, just so you know, but I missed a day because I'm not only doing one for my son, I'm doing one for myself, I'm doing one for my daycare person, I'm doing this, and I missed it by mistake, and by the time I realized, oh crap, I didn't do it, it was 12 o'clock. He was on his way home from school.
But we're not talking about the one kid who misses it one day. That's an easy phone call to
But
say, hey, could
it-
you do that?
But you could be, I could
What
be
we're
that
talking
one
about are
kid.
the chronic people,
No.
people that are refusing to fill it out.
So what happens if my child, I forgot that morning, he goes into school, Brian,
Then they
finds
call
out,
you
and he sends him home.
And you fill it out. No, what I just said is, we're not talking about the people that forget once. We're talking about the people that are chronic, that are refusing to fill it out, even though they've been reminded over and over, and they don't take it seriously.
But that's not the
That's
kid's
where we
problem, it's the
started, right?
parents.
That's where we started with our phone calls with a mix of people, families that we know that have not been doing it repeatedly, and some who may be in Kristen's position.
I can totally understand not doing it once, and a phone call can correct that in 30 seconds. But you're telling me that there are 30% of the population that can't be bothered, that don't take it seriously, or that don't care. As far as I'm concerned, they can stay home forever if it means protecting the kids that are here.
That's not the kid's fault.
I understand.
I think
It's mandatory in other schools.
So that's, you're busing every one of those kids home?
Yeah, exactly.
No, you have a quarantine space and you call a parent to come get them.
But the parents don't,
Every day?
If they
Don't pick them
fill it out.
up.
Well, that is, to me,
I don't care
that's
how
the
we do
thing.
it,
You don't
but-
fill it out, day 4, bus doesn't come to your house.
There's got to be some way to
There
do it.
has to be a
protect
way
the
to
people that are
make
doing
them
what's
do
necessary.
it. But if we bring them into the school, then that causes an issue to get them home, if the parents can't come and get them.
Yep, it's a razor's edge. So our
Right.
intention is to be able to teach people so that they know the importance of it.
Right.
Both in general through public service announcements, specifically through phone calls. And the end will be the parent has to come and get them. That's going to be very impactful for people. I'm very aware of that. And we're threading the needle. If you feel more comfortable with me accelerating that to next week, then my robocall tomorrow will be, I want you to know, fill it out, or, this will happen. I'm okay with that. We're trying to give it a timeline where people could learn better. And also, people's information is sometimes poor. They, for whatever reason, they don't have emails that are the right ones, or they don't have the phone numbers that are right ones. So we want to touch all these things before we start with punishment around. And I mean academic punishment as well as...
This isn't punishment. There is still virtual learning available to every single kid. This is protecting the people that are doing what's right and taking care of theirs. There's no punishment. It's not punitive.
Right.
I'm not holding it against the kid. We're still providing the education. We're still offering it. But we have to do what's right by the people that are making the effort to do what they need to. I mean, all it takes is one case. I'm telling you, it's going to slide in here because we didn't catch it, and we're going to shut the whole place down.
And it could easily be a family who's done everything right.
It could be.
exactly.
So
So we
I mean,
have to do
I think-
everything we can to avoid that.
But we have an obligation to the children whose parents are not parenting well.
Correct.
That's the
And
problem.
we're
isn't that
providing that through virtual learning.
Yeah.
That's provided to every kid, no matter what.
So if they don't do the just play it out for me. If they don't do the attestation, the family, you would propose there be a separate area another room, a virtual room where kids somewhere in the
Quarantine
area of,
room.
what do you think, 30, 40 kids each building?
It would be a lot, yeah.
Yeah. So then you have a room, and you give them a Chromebook, and you tell them they're remote that day in their seat, and they don't move.
Oh,
No, they're not in the school anymore.
No.
They gotta go somewhere. You're not gonna have a parent waiting in the parking lot.
You close them in till the parents get there to come get them, and then they go home and
But
they're...
they've lost a day of education by then.
You know what? Maybe the parents then will figure out that they need to do their job. I hate to
think
be
that
harsh
that's-
about it,
I think
but
that
I'm worried
that's
about
a charmed
protecting.
way of looking at things.
I hate to be harsh, but I want to protect the kids that are here doing what they're supposed to do. And the parents, it's not the kids' fault, I get it.
But they're the ones who pay. That's the
Well-
problem.
But you could have parents that are lying on the form and say, yeah, my kid has a runny nose, but guess what? I need him to go to school today.
So we should just throw the form out, not worry about temperature, let everybody come in and see how long it takes to shut the building down.
No, I think there is an expectation.
wanna do?
And we continue to strive for that expectation. And if there's something chronic, you do have to up it with proper notification. I
But we're
get
a
that.
month and a half into school. How,
But we've only been doing the attestation. That rolled out in many steps.
so we're
and
way behind, is what I'm talking.
That
Way
part
behind.
I'll give you. I agree. I also believe the school has an obligation to be checking that kid's temperature on the spot.
Every kid.
Personally, yeah,
Spot-
I think every
spot
kid.
checking is a waste of time.
I do too.
Right. I think for any child that has not filled out, or parent has not filled out an attestation, they should be checked,
But
and there should
Mm-hmm.
be a temperature check.
I said that at the beginning, I said the attestation is just a piece of paper, so.
If you don't enforce
The
it, it
truth,
is.
the truth in that is as reliable as anything else out there right now.
Right.
So the only thing that's reliable is, the only thing we have is a temperature check. That's it.
And I
Right.
think the messaging of having a parent do an attestation after the fact is just leaving ourselves open for them checking the box.
Yep.
Because if they didn't remember to send it, that means they didn't do it before the kid left anyway. So that's a useless piece of
But
information
that's what the
there.
paper attestation is now. It's a check the box. It's absolutely worthless. It's worthless at every single company, everywhere, around the world. It's useless.
So why are we putting so much effort into it?
So, it's the.
To get to the point where you have highlighted the importance, what we're trying to protect. We're going to try and get there.
But everybody here seems to agree it's a waste of paper. Nobody cares, nobody fills it out correctly. I fill it out every single morning. I fill it out the same every single morning. Takes me 10 seconds. But everybody's saying it's a waste of paper. Why are we putting that much effort into it? Let's instead go get thermometers and test every kid when they walk in the door.
Other school districts do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
A lot of places
I'm not
do
sure
it.
why we
I've seen
decided
days
to
you
do
get, say you fill these things out 4 times a day.
There's,
I mean, they do temperature checks and.
there's stores that do it for every single customer.
But are they useful, do you think?
That's all you got.
But is it useful?
No, I mean, it's only people and honesty. I mean,
the
who's
pa-
saying,
the paper
right,
is-
have you been around somebody? No, yeah, well, I need my haircut today, so no, I haven't, and I'm walking in and getting my haircut.
Yep. And you go buy milk,
Right, and it's the same thing, right?
so.
So we're back to the discussion at the beginning. Why do it if you're not going to enforce anything? If nobody thinks it's worth anything, why bother?
And we said that at the very beginning too.
I don't know what to tell you.
Then it goes back to, do you want to do temperature checks with everybody walking in the door? And that's only, one of 8 symptoms, so.
I thought employees had to, I think that should have been an expectation.
Had to what?
Had to get a temperature check. So I think every single employee should have at
Well, I
least
think
had to
that's
do
part of
that.
the attestation, isn't it?
Right,
You're supposed
For
to
everybody.
self-check.
you're supposed to
For
self-check.
everybody.
Self-check.
Right, but again, I think employees should have had to do it. Pretty much every company has employees doing it.
But you might as well
A
do
temperature
it.
check.
You walk in the
at the
building,
door.
you get it done.
But you have to, if you're going to do that, you might as well have every kid do it.
So,
It doesn't
right.
take that much
But
longer.
that was,
It's,
that's the next level, is doing every single child. Yep.
The science is flawed. Taking temperatures of people who are walking into a building is flawed.
Yep.
It's more flawed than a piece of paper.
yeah, they almost all come out normal because
Or-
it's cold outside.
75 degrees or 81 degrees.
Yeah, I agree.
For now, I'm going to attempt to work toward 100%. I think we had this discussion a month ago, and it was really from the board's guidance where we said we had questions about whether the people's sincerity when they fill it out. But I will let you know that we've had dozens and dozens and dozens of people fill it out and say yes. And it were genuine, and they stayed out because they weren't well. And if it's protecting us from 100 kids a month, great. let's go for 100% and see if we can protect ourselves from 100 sick people a month.
But we did also have that discussion about it wasn't worth the paper if we didn't enforce it. That was my big push from the beginning. And now here we are, a month and a half in, and we're still not enforcing it. I know we're working toward it. School year's not that long.
We are 17 days into school.
7 months into school.
17. 17 days, the lucky number.
We're going to get there. That's because, I will let you know, the reopening committee, in our reopening plans that we worked on for 3 months, decided that we would have the attestation, we gave people the attestation form and asked them to fill it out at home, not return it to the school. When we had our first board meeting in September, the consensus of the board was, that's not how we want to do it. We want every child to take it every day, and we want to know the answer. It has taken us time to be able to implement that, which is different from what we had pre-planned as a reopening committee. So I just wanted to explain some of the delay in it. We didn't reopen saying everyone's going to do it every day, and this is how we're going to go forward. Although I will say, by the first day of school, we sent it home to families, and that is what we said to them, that this is our expectation. We started in paper, then we went to an online version, and now we've gone to the version where we can easily see anybody who was supposed to but did not. So there are incremental steps. I wish we could have done it a month ago. Agree.
Yeah, I don't think there's fault anywhere, right? I think everybody's trying to get there as quick as we possibly can and, connect the dots and stuff like that. All of it's flawed, whether it's an attestation with paper, it's honestly, like you said, some people say yes and they'll keep their kids home, or some people say yes and not go to work. We know that, right? We have that out there. I mean, we definitely have good people out there that are honest, no doubt. Temperature check, probably not going to be great. We're in the Northeast, right? So as soon as you're in a car that's 100 degrees because you're freezing, get out of the car, it's back to 20. Who knows what your temperature's going to be? So that'll be flawed too. And we have people that are going into work now that make it through the temperature check and end up being COVID positive. So really, there's nothing that really works, right? But I think there has to be some sort of expectations that parents understand that they need to follow as many rules as possible and adapt to them.
Since we've started over these 17 days, we've sent home 72 children and advised them to seek help from a medical professional. And until recently, they needed a COVID test as well. The State Department of Health has recently changed their tune on that. We've sent 72 students home. 63 of them have come back with negative COVID tests. So there are students and families who are fulfilling this process. We've had 9 staff members who have gone out and been tested negative and come back to work as well. And we're just entering this cold and flu and allergy and messy season, so we anticipate we're going to have heightened illness and other issues that come out. Even from the beginning, we had said it's a tenuous thread. We potentially could close because our staff reaches a critical point where just because of normal illness, they can't come to work, and we have to close because there's no way to provide what we need to provide. So every day we are able to do it. We're very grateful, and we'll continue. We hope we can stay open.
So Brian, if those types of scenarios were to happen in the very near future, it's not an outbreak, there's no positive cases, but it triggers enough of that tipping motion where there's enough staff that have to take the time to figure that out. Temperature, illness, whatever.
Yes.
What is our notification process, and how will we go forward? Because right now, not every student has Chromebooks, so we can't make that switch overnight.
Right.
What's the timeline look like going forward in the event, the likely event, that we'll have at least one disruption? Probably multiple, maybe some long-term ones.
Likely. So what we've asked, we know that our K4 students do not have the devices at home, although many may have devices at home, but that's not the point of it. Is we're trying to pre-plan with a couple days of asynchronous learning. In other words, we have teachers are always asked to keep a couple of days of sub-plans on hold for when those events happen where they can't come to work, they're not feeling well. I mean, they could really not be feeling well and not be able to write a plan and send it in even. So to have a couple asynchronous days in the bag that allows us some leeway to get to where we need to go. In the event that we needed to close, it would look just like an emergency day. I will use the favorite water main right in front of the Coeymans Fire Department, which breaks pretty much every year and closes Peter B. requiring us to close only one building, it would look just like an emergency closure day, where we would say, building is closed, students would either participate synchronously with their teacher on the schedule they would have followed before, or asynchronously. And then we'd debate whether or not we had to claim that as a closure day or as a remote learning day. That line is very blurred right now with New York State, so it allows us some of things. If it's the whole district, it would look similarly. We would close the whole district. We would use our emergency response or emergency closure system to say, we're going fully remote. It's a yellow day, or sorry, it's a one day, and everyone in those buildings do that. So I hate to say it, but from grades 5 through 12, well, from 7 through 12, they're practicing every day for this because they always have half of their kids who are already learning remotely. It's those that are up to grade 6 where it becomes a little more complicated. 5 and 6 at least have their devices. So we have some plans in place right now, and we're getting better every day. We do anticipate being able to send devices eventually for our younger kids as well.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to envision, and I think many parents are trying to envision how that affects, by 11 o'clock at night, you have 4 teachers that are not available the next day because of this.
Yep.
But by 6 a.m. the next morning, 4 more are not feeling well and can't come in. That triggers the effect of a closure or a change of venue. How do you communicate with those teachers and say, okay, now you can go to remote and you're not sick, you're teaching remotely? Like, how have we played out those scenarios, and how do we communicate that to the parents that have to pivot that quickly?
If we're talking about a 6:30 or 7 in the morning, an elementary teacher has a start time of 8:35. I think that the expectation is they notify their principal by 7. That is not a time when we'd be canceling school. I did mean on a more significant basis, like we knew there was a wave of teachers who were out, and there's a new wave of teachers who's going to be, or staff members, I should say. We would know, we would only do a closure ahead of time. We can't call a closure at 7 in the morning. It's people have already left for work, or they're on a holding pattern waiting to go do something. So we would probably mobilize everything else in our power. In other words, we would open school and we would modify where or how the students are being instructed. At least at the elementary level, the teachers who are teaching remotely are not also teaching in person. So that's a game changer right there. They're already disconnected. So we could put the students in a larger location with one staff member supervising them. We could have staff from other buildings come over to assist. We do this all the time when we're having a crisis of some kind. So if it were that kind of late, I doubt that we would close, because it's not feasible for families or for staff at that juncture. We've had a chance to practice basically almost all these drills, including the emergency release of Becker, which was yesterday? Was it yesterday? Yeah. It seems like a year ago, where we evacuated, relocated, and reunited with families in a different location. That's the best way to practice, unfortunately, because we were able to do it in a situation where no one was harmed and the building was safe. But we've been practicing.
So, and this is great discussion, and if people are listening, they now know more than they probably did know. I'm going to beat on the same drum. How can we get it out to the masses? How can I know that we have a CRT, crisis response team.
Yes.
They probably do a lot of things that are not related to COVID, but are about dealing with different crises. Again, if we can put something out there so that people have an expectation, so that, as you said, they're not caught off guard by a robocall and about what to do. It's already written, it's already out there, they already know.
Got it.
Okay. You all set, Dr. Beal?
I am. I have a quick question for Sue.
Okay.
For our next board meeting, we have the auditor's report, external auditor's report, and what was the other thing? Our new architects coming to discuss the building condition survey. Fred had a presentation tonight on the implementation of social emotional learning in the district, which has been forwarded by the governor and the state education department. I wanted to ask you if you would like for him to present tonight or push off until next week within his portion of the meeting. Or would you like to hear it tonight? It's not especially long. It's 12 slides, I think. 15 slides. Each one will take no more than 25 minutes.
I think I heard him say next week.
10 seconds a slide and we're good.
Yeah. We have 2 more presentations next week.
Yep, John Sharkey and our external auditor. How long would the auditor take next week?
What do we have, 5 petitions, 10?
And that's all gonna be
petition?
Half an hour.
Will this
How
be on
many
our
petitions?
website?
Yes.
Then I think a summary would be quick and great, and we can refer to it being on the website.
Fair enough. Brian, can you start the projector? 10 seconds a slide. That was a directive. I have the first 4, so I get 40 seconds.
He practiced for 30 seconds a slide.
Yeah, we can wait. Yeah. There are a couple things I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you, we did a soft opening of our website, which went great when we had no power and half the stuff was lost in the ether. But the new website is live, as is our app. I wanted to share some of the public relations stuff that we'll be putting out over the next week as we further harden the opening of the new access to it. I will share them through email so you can see some of the things that are going to go out. Okay, I see the first slide up. You're in good shape. All right, it's important to note that we closed in March. We closed March 14th, 15th?
So we need to finish this meeting before that.
By the 17th, the governor had officially closed us. By March 25th, New York State United Teachers, which represents 700,000 members in New York State, I think, or more, 700,000 teachers and plus more, they had already identified the impact this was going to have, the closure was going to have on our students and our staff. They put out these statements, the statement here about what's going to happen, the distress caused by this for our family members, being afraid of being ill, etc. They knew within the first week of closure the impact this was going to have on our students and staff and our families. Next slide, Fred. So they made some suggestions at that time about what to do, how members or staff members throughout the state could assist with that, reaching out to students and families, suggesting how families can help maintain and support each other, maintain a sense of hope, and infuse social, emotional, cultural responsiveness. It wasn't until really July, next slide, Fred, when the governor finally spoke out and said, as part of the reopening plans, we expect every school district to acknowledge the need to support students' social emotional health. They have been impacted significantly by this event. And then the state education department came out the week after that, thank you, Fred, with their Recovering, Rebuilding, and Renewing the Spirit of New York Schools. And it talks about the inclusion of social emotional learning across all aspects, keeping in mind the governor's caveat not to supplant teaching, teaching and learning. There needs to be education as well, but throughout, the common thread needs to be that there needs to be support for our students who have suffered, and to clearly acknowledge our staff have as well. Next slide, Fred. And the New York State Center for School Safety has, if you can read these tabs here, it says, what is school climate? And all schools in New York State were expected to fill out a climate survey last year. That went great for implementation. Measuring school climate, restorative practice as an element of school culture, social emotional learning, and trauma-informed schools. And really what they're talking about in social emotional learning within this state agency is ability to check on each other's personal wellness. Where are we? And how do we explicitly teach it and offer it for the members of our community? And how do we train our staff so that they're prepared to do that? So I'll leave it with Fred now to talk about how we've chosen to implement that this year.
So just because we are all connected to the community, we know since March what we have faced and what our students have faced, what our teachers have faced, what we have faced as community members. We try to have empathy of what they're going through. We know that students have expressed to us these feelings that are listed there. Social distancing takes on a much larger meaning for students who desperately need time with peers. Even those introverts who might be loving the time alone need to make sure that they're making meaningful connections with peers and with other staff members. So these were the considerations from the guidance document that Dr. Bailey shared. If you look at this list, you'll see that some of these things we have done over the last couple of years. We have taken steps towards an MTSS, or multi-tier systems of support. We're looking at data through building targets and action plans around behavior and social emotional learning. And we're doing things like dipping our toe in and trying to go deeper in things like restorative practice and trauma-sensitive care. Just take a second to look at these 5 competencies.
I'm going to read them because they're small to read on the
sure.
screen. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making.
So Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, New York State's guidance around social emotional learning is based off of CASEL, a national, international agency. If you look at these, we already know that teachers typically teach many of these skills within their day. Thinking about organizational skills, protocols around peer interaction. So what we want to encourage are those coaching strategies to be a little bit more codified and make them a bit more systematic. I know if I show you another triangle, you'll probably throw something at me, but here is another triangle. And we want to be mindful to make this more systematic. Those arrows represent either data or assessments that tell us a student or a classroom may need additional support. So the idea around a screener for response to intervention or some sort of behavioral assessment for PBIS, those allow us to know if a kid needs additional support. So part of the guidance is to continue to work in this framework, make sure that we're doing everything we need to do in order to make sure that we're encouraging that. This year, we are encouraging our buildings to look at the diagnostic tool for school and district effectiveness. Several of our schools in the past have looked at this, and we can talk more about this another time, but just to point out that one of the tenets is around social emotional learning. Targets, if you remember from last year, were around behavior, and they used this tenet to look at best practice and try to build supports for a framework around best practice, not only for SEL, but things that come with it, like attendance, behavior, academics. They're all part of that tenet. So action steps. Some of you know that we have implemented a screener called Close Gap. We wanted that to be a quick probe for students to be able to express their feelings. We know that if students aren't in a great emotional space for the day, then the academics aren't going to occur. We want to make sure that we are revising our guidance counselor plan to really reflect what's going on right now. We're going to talk a little bit more next week around the grants. Part of the grant monies that we're going to use is for supporting SEL, and we've gotten some additional grants for that work as well. And we want to make sure that we're continuing to foster that connectedness, even if we go remotely. So one of the resources that we are investing in, and we shared that at the CNI meeting today, is a program called Character Strong, which is being implemented at the middle school. The resource, it has been provided for elementaries and high school, and they're trying to figure out how they might be able to implement that. And what that does is it builds community not only in an in-person type of environment, but also if we have to go virtually, because we know those instances of isolation will increase if we have to go remote. So we want to negate that as much as possible. Continue to use mindfulness strategies in Class Dojo. We're looking into going deeper with Second Step, which is the program that we've been utilizing in elementary and middle school. Our student support staff have actually been pushing into classrooms, K-8, much more, so on a weekly or twice a week basis to go over some of these lessons with students. And of course, continue to provide professional development and encourage SEL in content areas.
Fred, a couple of questions. This
Sure.
closed gap, if we started that,
We have started that.
what kind of participation have we had in it?
We
Good.
have had about, for most buildings, about 80% of students. We have, go ahead.
I was going to ask you to describe what that looked like. I mean, what the,
Sure.
what the, it itself looks like when a student takes it.
Yep, and we are, and it's, some of our teachers will testify to the fact that first couple of days, it took a little bit to jump on, but once you get on, it's a couple of questions like, how are you feeling today? Choose, how are you feeling? Very quick, it should be ideally very quick around kind of your thoughts around how you're feeling today. Would you like to talk to someone? That information goes to the classroom teacher and to student support staff. And again, it's to support individual students, obviously, but then also looking at that data from a building perspective and what other things could we do to support a building-wide support system for those students. We've already had students whose families decided, for whatever reason, to opt them out of taking that, who have asked if they could take it anyway, because they really wanted the opportunity to speak to some of our support staff, which they're open at any time. They can speak to our.
So is it something like when they log into the computer that they automatically have to fill this out? Is that what it happens?
They have to go to that. It's not going to pop up
So
automatically.
they have to go in and do
They
it
would go in
themselves?
and do that, yes.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why we would have loved to have started this sooner, but because something like this is so sensitive, we wanted to make sure that, as we mentioned last time, all the 2D compliance around student privacy, that we had contracts with this company to make sure that this data would be private and only used by the district.
My other question is this Character Strong program. So we've already started using this? or-
In our middle school building only.
Okay,
We have purchased it for elementary and high school, but right now it's just a resource.
Yep.
They've been really, at elementary, been utilizing Second Step a lot more.
okay.
But they may utilize that, especially if we have to go remote. Most elementary teachers, do some sort of morning meeting, community building session in the beginning of the day. This would be a really nice resource. It's by teachers for teachers, so most lessons take 5 to 15 minutes.
So I guess one of the reasons why I asked this is recently, I think the PTA had a fundraiser for this program. Is this something that they're going to donate money for us to buy the program, or is this just something to support the program? I would have thought it would be something that school would purchase.
Middle school PTA, PTO realized that they needed some sort of character education program at the middle school. It's one of the things that the teachers had asked for at the middle school. So they actually started implementing or taking steps towards implementation of Character Strong before we went out for COVID in March. So they were looking at additional resources, I believe, that could come with Character Strong, because we've already purchased the main
Got it.
resource for them.
Okay,
Good question.
thank you. Anybody else have questions?
Just the last slide, oftentimes we do put a lot of focus on our students. We want to make sure that our adults in our district are also being supported with their social emotional health as well. So I know admin have increased some virtual office hours. I've met with especially our elementary complete remote instruction teachers every other week to talk through just that consistency. I think the more that you can be there for our adults, just like our students, making those connections, it's important. We just found out we're able to do a virtual yoga. So we did regular yoga last year, so we're going to be able to do through a Blue Shield. Again, just promoting social emotional health for all of our adults. And then on our website, let's see if I can get to it, you'll see that we are celebrating some of our teachers and some of the awesome work that they're doing. All of our teachers are really working hard, but we wanted to feature a teacher. And so we have some success stories on our website regarding that.
Great.
We could intend on extending that to other staff as well as the year goes on.
Does the district participate in an EAP program?
Yes.
Okay. And those resources are shared and easily accessible?
Great. Mrs. Moran?
Yep, in front of you today, you have the reserve plan, it's the draft. I'll just go over it briefly, and then you can ask questions next week when we talk about the external audit. The audit committee will meet on Friday morning to go review the draft audit. We'll get it out. But again, it just, what this reserve plan does, we've been adopting it now. This is the third year. And I give you a snapshot of what the reserve is, what it's used for, when it was established, the current balance, and what there were. I give you the current balance at the end of last year, what it is now, and then the activity. So we have the capital reserve, we know that. It just gives you a little brief snapshot. You can all take your time, go through it, ask questions next week, but I don't feel like we have to rush a little bit.
Joey,
And then-
can I ask one question quick though? Do we have a time limit on the capital reserve?
Yes, there is a time limit on the capital reserve. The capital reserve has a 10-year limit. So we'll be doing something on a referendum at the upcoming, this year's vote or next year's. But yes, we do have a limit on that.
Okay, that's what I thought. 10 years, right?
10 years, yes,
You'll
sir.
spend it before 2023.
Yep, and I believe it was established in 2014.
It says May 2013 on here.
Then
that's why.
13 it is. Yep, it's pretty good. See, I just want to see if you're paying
That's why I asked
attention.
the question. Yep.
Good one.
Thank
Again, I think the only thing I'd like to point out, your repair reserve has stayed the same. We would again need voter approval to further fund that. The unemployment reserve, again, just needs board action. We did all of this earlier this year, and we did increase that activity. We put $300,000 in that reserve because right now, we've already spent $37,000 in unemployment, and over the last 3 years, the total we spent was only $10,000. And we have to prepare if other people are, if we have to close or anything else, we want to make sure that that's funded. Tax surcharge, you're going to see a tremendous drop in that, $425,000. That also adds to our unappropriated fund balance, which you won't see on this, but we'll talk about that next week. And the reason being for that is when I first started, we established a tax surcharge reserve for $500,000 when we had the Selkirk Cogen, or Sabic, was that Selkirk Cogen? I'm not sure if that's the name of it. But we can only keep tax cert reserves for 4 years, and if we don't have that liability anymore, at the end of the 4th year, that reserve has to go away. So right now, the current balance of $42,000 does reflect what we have on file right now for challenges. Our auditors are very strict. They don't let us overfund. You'd see some school districts overfund their reserves. We don't. We unfortunately get cited for having excess of 4%. This year will be a little bit higher than usual because of what we underspent because of COVID. The reserve for employee benefits, the accrued liability, which is what we pay to our employees upon their departure of service, whether it's through retirement. It is through retirement. So, and we fund that pretty much fully funded. So again, the net activity to that was only $219,000. We took money out and put money in. The retirement reserve fund, and you'll see us start to utilize those funds in the next couple of years, as we'll use it as a way to offset increases in expenditures and to manage our fund balance that we use to offset the taxes. The retirement contribution reserve for the TRS is a relatively new reserve. Again, there's a formula that we can use for that reserve. We put as much as we're allowed to put in it. Right now we have a current balance of $683,000, and then your reserve for debt. That's just a reserve that we use when we get premiums. When we do a ban or bond borrowing, we get premium. That money would be housed in that, and we would use to offset the cost of the debt. And again, on the last page is just a snapshot of the dollars in the chart. And again, you can look through that. If you have any questions, you can ask me now. You can call. We can talk about it next week with the external audit. And the other thing that was on my topic today, and again, this is a request to the board. We've had the town of Bethlehem has wanted to come and talk to us about their conservation easement exemption program, as well as their farms and forest fund. Again, they were going to come this month. And because of COVID, they didn't. They would like to address the board in January. Again, one of the programs that they have there for Bethlehem residents, and one of them is for people that are landowners that have more than 5 acres of undeveloped land. They can do it today. They could go to the town of Bethlehem and they could meet with them, and there's this program. They would buy the development cost of the property, and again, each one is unique. It financially compensates farmers or landowners for the development of their property. Each thing is, unique There's not a simple formula for it. They would like to share that information so our public can hear it, because not many people do know about that. And the other piece, the Conservation Easement Exemption Program, falls into a program where a landowner, again, can opt into it, and they can choose for how long they want, where they choose to not develop their land and get a break on their taxes, whether they be town and or school taxes. And currently, right now, the Bethlehem School does participate, and we do not. And I did meet with them a year ago, 6, 7 months ago, way before the pandemic. And I told them in order for the district to even be able to make a decision, we'd have to know what the financial impact would be. So
Joanne,
they haven't had a chance to give us that
Haven't we
yet.
talked about this 2 or 3 times already? I think we've already turned this down. And I thought the last time I remembered, we were waiting for the town supervisor to come talk to us about the Becker sign, and then we were going to discuss this after that.
But that's not the only issue. The other issue is that a large amount of the land in the town of Bethlehem that is in chunks over 5 acres is in our school district, not in the Bethlehem School District. We would take a large tax hit from this if these people decided, I'm going to keep this forever wild and take a 90% decrease on my taxes. That's going to be a huge hit to us. It's not nearly as bad to Bethlehem, which is why Bethlehem opted in.
Correct. So my question to the board is, do you want them to come in, present, and talk about it, or you want me to tell them we are no longer, we are not interested in this
They're welcome to
information?
come talk.
I think
Bring
we
it
were
on.
willing to talk to the town supervisor. We would love to hear from him and have them answer questions as to why they didn't approve our sign.
All right.
I really think that was the
January, I'll
case
let
the
them
last time we had this in front of us.
We put the offer out there.
I'll
Come
let
talk
them-
to us.
All right.
Joanne, for next week, or, our next presentation, can you bullet some things? I hear from a lot of people in the community, how is COVID affecting our budget?
Yep.
And I mean, some of those big items, people are like, oh, you must have saved a ton of money by not having kids in school last spring.
Yep.
And we know that's not necessarily a realistic view. So I think if there's something that we can show where there's, easy bullets, ideas of where there were big impacts, both
Absolutely.
more money or less money, and
Yep.
just show.
No problem. We can do that. You're going to see most of it's more money, but we'll go through that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, we're all set. Anyone have anything to add to new business? We covered a lot already. Is there anything else?
The only thing that I wanted to add, and it may fall under old business too, but we had talked, the board, about maybe messaging through the guidance department the availability of electives rather than study halls. I know it's been a common conversation over the past couple of years, but especially in this period where there's compressed schedules, where we're doing this hybrid method, I'm hearing from folks in town that students have, multiple study halls, and is there any way for them to perhaps choose an elective? I'm hoping that our guidance department can put some sort of messaging out there, whether it be a video, whether it be some sort of written document, but really encouraging what's out there, what the method is for investigating the possibilities, and what could be done, whether it's appropriate at the quarter, half year, what the appropriate interval is too.
I agree. I think we need to be proactive.
So I don't know if that's new business or old business. I just,
Yeah, be proactive about looking towards that second half of the year as far as, students and study halls and availability of classes they could take.
I think it's also important for parents somehow to get the information about what those classes being offered would contain, what the value of them are. Sometimes a one-word title doesn't give you an impact on how it affects your
Right.
your everyday life or your options for any kind of secondary education or even just job prospects.
Do we not have some kind of a guide that lists every course that's available with a description and so on?
We do, yes.
We do.
The other thing, as we've talked about this before, we did send out some information when we knew that the high school would still have lunch within their schedule, but no actual lunch, as we put out a list for just those 4 periods, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we didn't do the remainder of the period, so there is some value in what you guys, you've described. The other thing that was a conscientious balance is maximum capacity in all the other classes that we offer. But the counselors would know where the room is.
Right.
As I've talked to a number of families, depending on the cohort day, you could have 7 kids in a class on one day and 15 on another. So there's potential for some of exactly as you've described.
Another question I have is that the drills that go on during school, I think there was a lockdown drill today. We got the notice. In the COVID world of lockdown drill, what occurs? Because I know what was explained to me what happened, which was they just shut the doors. We're not allowed to do what normally goes on in a lockdown drill because of COVID. So what is the value of having a lockdown drill if you can't really execute what it's supposed to do?
You have to have them according to the state, but you can't do anything you normally do. So all you can do is tell the kids what you would do.
Exactly.
And if it's an emergency, we're going to do what we were supposed to do and not worry about COVID.
Gotcha. Well, again, I
The
heard
problem
about it
is
said,
when
I
you
thought it
drill
was interesting.
something the wrong way, it means you've just reinforced the wrong thing to
Yeah,
do.
but the state's telling you have to have the drill, but you can't do it that way, so.
Ray has very eloquently described it. What they did
I've been through it, so I know it doesn't work. But
They created some alongside language that goes with all of the traditional lockdown, shelter in place, and evacuations that we would ordinarily do, with the new guidance of how we have to do it. Fire drills or evacuations are a perfect example. It would be bell rings, everyone gets out. And now they've purposely stated you will stagger dismissal, you'll maintain social distancing, you'll distance when students go outside. We, look at some of our buildings. We usually put them on a parking lot or in a small field, and we've gone to having to have to use every square inch of the fields around our buildings.
Yeah.
And the shelter in place and lockdown is the same thing.
Right.
So what I worry about most, and Tina, your comments are well heard, if we practice it consistently so that we get a consistent result, it's our youngest learners that we worry about most. As we demonstrated yesterday, and as we called that evacuation from Becker yesterday, we clearly stated all of those things that have been put as the sidebar, here's how you have to practice it, go away.
Right.
We do everything to keep people safe, and everything else goes out the window until we've gotten to a location where we can maintain social distancing and everything else. So when we evacuated yesterday, masks were on, students were not 6 feet apart. It's just something that we had to sacrifice. Our staff are continuously told that. This is the way we practice, and when we do it the way we've done it every other year. So it's not perfect by any means.
No, but it's good, and I think it's good to talk about it so that people understand that, if they hear anecdotally that, oh, we did this, but we didn't do anything, there's reason and rationale behind all of it.
We've always maintained a level of secrecy about all of it, and that's part of, we have our generalized district safety plan, and then party's over.
You out of here? Stop the mic.
His mic fell off.
I got it.
The wire.
I got it.
2319.
Can't take him anywhere.
We're going virtual next week. Is that we maintain confidentiality about many of the levels of procedures. What we will do is can generally say, we want you to know we're doing things a little bit differently this way, in order to maintain the other caveats that have been put on us. But it's a reasonable thing. If you're asking the question, I'm sure other families are as well.
And I just wanted to give kudos to the high school. PSAT was canceled this weekend. I see that there's a note out that they're going to try for next week or a week after that. Thank you. Thank you for looking into it so quickly, because I do think it's important for those kids to have an opportunity to take a pre-exam before taking an actual SAT.
As long as the school board follows through, that's exactly what we'll be doing, which is 28th of October, I think.
Not the school board.
Not the school board.
29th.
College board.
College board. School board would do it.
Excuse me, college board. Thank you.
Okay, great. We have no BOE committee reports this week, no policy adoptions for review, and hearings and petitions, what some of our crowd has been waiting for. What's going to be our process or procedure with this?
We call up the person's name. Sue knows Yeah,
Or is
there's a podium over there.
Okay,
Sue will wipe down the microphone and the podium after each person goes up and speaks. We ask that you keep your mask on. Be great if you didn't touch anything, but if you do, Sue's going to wipe it down with the cloth as well. But as normal, Teddy, just call
okay.
them up.
Thank you. First one is Joshua Wolin, who would like to discuss the pool and outside groups and the community impact.
Not going to touch anything. First, I want to thank you guys. I know you've had so much to take care of over the last couple of weeks and months to get the schools back open, and I'm sure you've been in meetings all day, Dr. Bailey and the School Board of Education. This is my first time ever presenting to a school board, so figured I'd go first today. I come here to you today as a taxpayer, as a volunteer assistant coach for multiple sports teams in the school, and also the head coach of the Albany Starfish. Dr. Bailey, I'm sure, has gotten numerous emails in regards to this matter. It's something that we've been working on nonstop since June. We've been putting out policies so that the outdoor pools could get open, and we also presented policies which helped the school be able to reopen its program for the boys and girls swim teams here. I come to you today because I think allowing the Albany Starfish and our programming into the pool is a little bit more unique than just an outside group. We get classified as an outside group, but we have so many differences. First difference is we rent the school 6 days a week, about 300 days a year, and our program brings in about $15,000 to $20,000 a year plus for the school. The other parts to that is it goes beyond just our swim team. Right, our swim team brings in a lesson program, which over the course of the last 12 months, and that's being closed down for the last 5 months, we've had over 150 families that have come in and taken swim lessons, which are offered through our program. And we do that at a significantly reduced cost to any other facility in the region, and we do that to meet the needs of the community here in Ravena. To go on with that, currently RCS has 5 kids looking to swim in college, 2 of them swimming Division I. Over the last 3 years, we've had 3 kids leave the swim program here to go and swim, not just Division I, but we have a girl right now at West Point who's breaking all the records. And it's always been a great thing for the school. And to go with that, we have $20,000 to $30,000 a year that we contribute to other programs for philanthropic natures. We have one of the largest scholarship programs in the region. And I know that it's not about money, it's about safety, and I appreciate that. My dad is on the NIH. I started out medically trained and transitioned into to coaching, so I respect that. The reason why I think the situation is different is the pool is in an envelope. It is completely cut off from the side of the school. We've proposed plans where there would be an entry into the pool through the side door and out through a separate side door. We proposed a plan where we would actually rent porta potties and have them set up outside. So the only way that people would actually touch school grounds and be within the building would be to enter through that door, get into the water with a mask, take it off at the pool, and then they would get out. And any bathroom usage would happen in a porta potty so that we don't even have to worry about that. We've also offered to handle the cleanings before and after, scrubbing down the deck, wiping down all the door handles to offset the burden to the janitorial staff. Now, I know that could become a union issue, at which point we understand if that's not a possibility, but it's something to help offset the burden. The Starfish Swim Club has 200 kids. Kids from the ages of 4 years old, we have kids who are still swimming that are 28 years old. We're all over the capital region, and we'd like to think that other schools are letting in kids to swim. We talked about the Colonial Council earlier. Right now, most of the major swim teams are swimming now, but RCS, Holy Names, and a whole bunch, the rest of the schools within that council have been moved to March. So our kids who are looking at recruiting purposes and our kids are just on a separate playing field at this point. So then one of the other things that we're missing out by not letting the outside groups into the pool is lifeguard trainings. If you go and look at the staff for the RCS lifeguard staff, every one of those lifeguards have been trained by the instructors through the Albany Starfish program. We do that not only for this community, but for Mosher Pool, and we do that for the entire capital region. In addition to that, every year, I've either run a course, a full course or a recertification course for all of the phys ed teachers in the program, in the school district, so that all the phys ed teachers are both lifeguard and CPR to professionally certified. And I do this at no profit to me. The course is only run to cover the cost of the cards and their certifications, and we do that as a service for the school. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. Schools across the state, high schools across the state are renting out to outside groups. It's not in a common practice currently in the Capital District, which I find interesting since we have some of the lowest case counts. Now, currently, Schenectady High School and Clifton Park, Shenandoah, have plans to let in their club teams, their outside swim teams, some point in October, okay? No, I think Schenectady sooner than Clifton Park, but those plans are in place. And I know it's tough being the first one, but our program does a lot more than just teach swimming. Our program, when we were talking earlier about the socio-emotional effects, right? And I have people in this room whose kids have swam for me. You have people up on the board who have kids who have swam for our program. It's a lot more than come in, swim some laps, and go home. You know, if you've ever swam, it is hard. It is impossible. But if you walked on the pool deck today when the 13 RCS varsity kids had a chance to get in for their first practice, they're smiling across the board, all right? Masks on. You've never seen so many kids so excited to get into a pool and go swim 3 miles in 2 hours without breathing, right? Because you don't get to do a whole lot of that. But this is a release for them. And I understand if you say yes to me, you got to say yes to the outside groups, but I think this is different because we can do this without entering any of the educational spaces during the school. It is a ginormous form of revenue for the program in terms of outside groups. And it's one of those things that, yes, right now I'm volunteering so that we can get the RCS high school students in, but I can't get the RCS middle school students in, and I definitely can't get the RCS elementary school students in. And what do I say to those homeschool families that live in Greene County or around the outside of RCS that either they work here or they come in and teach lessons here or they utilize the space? And I can't say to them, hey, go to your high school and swim on your varsity team. They don't have it. What do I tell to the 6, 7, 8-year-olds who lose out on all this critical development? And we see, it's start to finish. I have 4-year-old kids who are going and signing individual and scholarships right now. If you take more time out of their lives than they already have, we're in trouble. Now, our team has practiced for the last 4 months, including all of October, or all of September, outside. We had 0 cases. There are 0 cases of transmission of COVID in any indoor or outdoor aquatic facilities. We have the okay from the Department of Health. We have okay from the state. And where we might be one of the first programs in the capital region to open this back up, we're not one of the first kids in one of the first schools in the state, let alone in the country. So we're literally keeping our kids in the capital region at a disadvantage. And, if we need to try a sample, maybe give us the weekends, where we can at least get kids in 2 days a week. But swimming's not like basketball. You can't take 6 months off and go warm up your shot, and in a couple of days you have it back. It's not like baseball, where you go to the batting cages, you take your swings. Swimming is very similar to track, where it requires constant repetitive motion, it requires feel, and it requires a ton of neuromuscular development. We've already had a break out of the pool, and it took forever to get the kids back in shape. We've been out of the water 2 weeks now, and I fear that if we can't get these kids into a facility soon, and RCS is designed perfect where we can keep them out of the school but in a pool, the impact would be pretty major. So I appreciate the time, and have a great day.
Thank you. Jennifer Molino? Huh? Oh, sorry, Sue. Yeah, forgot about that.
That's all right.
Again, thank you very much for letting me have the opportunity to speak. I appreciate that you guys opened it up to the public. I know you did that at a risk to everyone, and I appreciate that. My concern is for my daughter's in 5th grade at the middle school, and she is receiving her specials virtually. My son at the elementary school gets them in person. He has the opportunity to go outside during PE. I'm just curious as to why that can't potentially be an option for the 5th graders. I know they're kind of in a weird situation because they're at the middle school, but they're being treated as elementary school students, and so they're kind of at a loss, and I feel like they've kind of lost a lot of stuff too. They've, had to leave their home schools and come to middle school, and they were very welcomed, but that's just my concern at this point. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Trisha Grogan. Oh, still gotta wait that minute for Sue to clean, sorry. Yeah, hybrid and shortened day.
My voice is pretty loud, so I might not even need that. I'm not going to be as quick as her, I can guarantee you that. So I had no intention of coming up here, but I just wanted to piggyback off of what Josh said. Dr. Bailey, while I respect what you say about not allowing outsiders in, I do ask that you take Starfish Swim Club into consideration. I spoke with Kyle Kearney. He said he developed a plan that ensured the safety for the kids that were swimming. The plan was approved by the Department of Health. I also spoke with Coach Josh, and he also has the kids' safety as his #1 priority. As a parent of a swimmer, I can tell you right now, I see the effect it had on my daughter, physically and emotionally. I ask you to definitely consider allowing Starfish to use the pool. It's good for the kids. Our kids need some sense of normalcy, even if it's only a few days a week, as Josh had said. I also ask you to think about the offset of the cost. We have no idea what we are facing financially with our district next year because of COVID, and I know that brings in revenue. You might hate me for saying this, but even if you up them a little bit to make more money, sorry, Josh, it definitely warrants for the kids, for our community, for everything. That was that. Now, the real reason why I'm here. I'm a mom, I have 3 daughters, an 8th grader who is, I don't even know if she's middle school / high school because she's in the high school. Fred, I want to thank you for saying that you're worried about the social emotional of adults. As a parent and as a teacher, and I think I speak for many of my coworkers, we are drowning. We are treading water every day. We have so many things that are thrown at us, so many things that keep changing, and we're going with it, and that's fine. The daily, I have so many notes, they're like shorthand over here. You guys have said so much that have made me think of other things. That daily attestation form, thank you for changing it. The first week I filled that out, I'm like, I can't do this for myself times 3 others every day. It was ridiculous. Today, it's super easy. It takes all of 5 seconds to do for each one of my kids. So, Bray Engel, I have to agree with you. It's so easy. I think we need to make a bold statement with parents that are not doing it, whether we send their kids home or not, because I am doing my part as a parent. I don't even know if, as an educator, is there a way for me to see if the kids in my classroom did not fill it out? I have no problem calling those parents saying you need to fill it out. But I do think if we make a bold statement and send that kid home, I guarantee you that parent is going to fill it out next time, and it's not going to happen again. I am going to jump around because I didn't expect some of this. Tina, you mentioned something about being prepared and being ready for going virtual. A recommendation, we have a half day coming up. Can we cancel that half day and do a test run virtually? I have 2nd graders that have never been in a Google Meet outside. They have no idea how to do it. If I could do a test run with the parents in them, it would be extremely beneficial for my kids in my classroom and for myself to know what kinks I have to get out in the event that we do go virtual. I also want to thank each of you for being here and giving us the opportunity to be here. If I was at home, I wouldn't have been able to sit here and listen to everything that everyone said, and I may have shut it off by now because I would have had to tend to things at home. So consider maybe even having a public forum once a month, maybe every other meeting, because I do think it's important that you open this up to the public. Now to jump into what I had written. We did an amazing job. I want to say thank you to all of you. You guys ensured the safety of faculty, staff, and our kids. It's amazing what you guys did. I want to thank everyone that was on the summer committee, the reopening committee. It definitely was not an easy task to tackle, but you guys did it. But I do have some questions that people on the reopening committee could not answer. Questions that people in my building at middle school, high school, they can't answer. Why do we have a shortened day? The reason I ask this is now that we have elementary kids attending school less than 4.5 hours a day, as a teacher, I'm telling you right now, I am only actually able to teach my students 1.5 hours to 2 hours a day, if I'm lucky. On an amazing, wonderful day where I have no hiccups, maybe 2.5 hours out of my 4.5 hours. The reason why is the stagger time starts at 8:30. My kids do not finish arriving until 9:10. And then I have to serve them breakfast in my classroom. Then I have to have them fill out this social emotional learning close gap every day, which the administration has been amazing in getting us through that, but it's not an easy task. And as a teacher, I can sit here and tell you right now which one of my 11 kids has needs and what they warrant and what has to be done and how I can pick up the phone and possibly help with the resources within our school and or their parents. I don't need that computer program telling me which kids are at risk. I also spend about 40 to 50 minutes in doing mask breaks. By the time I bring my kids outside, inside, outside, inside, I've just wasted that time. Taking lunch orders, taking breakfast orders for the next day, setting up placemats, handing out their food. The dismissal, with all due respect, dismissal is not at 15, 20 minutes. It takes 40 to 45 minutes. My dismissal starts at 1:35, my last kid leaves, sometimes 2:10, 2:15. I'm also here to speak on behalf of my children. Some of the teachers at the high school are cramming so much work into their day, whether it's on the meet or in school, because of the shortened schedule. And I have to say, as an educator, I don't blame them. They're trying to get more work in, but it's crushing my kids. My kids spend 4 to 6 hours in their bedroom because they have to. I have 3 of them. They can't be in the same room. And then they're spending another 2 to 3 hours doing work. My kids are locked in their bedroom for 8 to 10 hours sometimes a day. That is not okay with me. This emergency thing that just happened, the green team, they missed 2 valuable days of in-person. I really thought, I was under the impression that we were going to bump that so that that didn't happen to those kids, and that did not happen. Another issue, my 13-year-old, she sits in some classes for 2.5 hours without a break because of this block schedule and because of the staggered arrival. And why are kids not being fed lunch? My child eats at 6:30 in the morning and doesn't get home till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She doesn't eat for 6+ hours. I am requesting to everyone on the board, Dr. Bailey, Mr. Engelhardt, the same way we are reevaluating CRI students, I am asking you to reevaluate everything that I just spoke to you about. The shortened day, maybe do an every other day with the green team, yellow team, because this 2 days on, 2 days off, I am losing my mind as a parent with it. And I seriously ask you to look into the middle school, high school kids eating lunch, eating something. I don't really care, but 6 hours is not okay. And lastly, these mask breaks. I'm not even sure what's going on with that because my kids eat breakfast and lunch in my room, their masks are off. Why do I have to relocate them outside, which is taking 40 minutes of my day? Why can't they just sit in the room, take their mask off for about 10 minutes? I also wanted to let you know I'm being told that at some level the mask breaks at the high school are not occurring. They're being disregarded. Again, I don't blame the teachers. So much of their teaching time has been taken away. I guess that's a way to make it up. If we were on a full day schedule, maybe it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Personally, being in a room with my kids and keeping them 6 feet apart, I don't see any harm in letting them take their mask down for 5 or 10 minutes if they're sitting there listening to a teacher instruct them. It would give us as teachers valuable teaching time, and it would give valuable teaching time to our kids. I want to thank each of you for listening to me go on up here. I know we're all in this together, and I know this is uncharted waters. We cannot make change for the better if we're unaware of it. And that is why I'm here letting all of you know this. I am living this every day on both sides, in the building and at home with my kids. We're doing great, we're getting there, but there are some things that I do think can change in the best interest of all of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. One more. Donna Hummel for clubs.
Thank you for letting us all be here tonight. That's great. And like Ms. Grogan over there, wow, I wanted to talk about clubs, but I think some other things came to my mind. It's kind of difficult sitting here with masks on for even a couple of hours, and I know you require all of us to keep ours on and keep them on correctly, and I'm sure you request and require that of my daughter when she's in school. So this is not acceptable, I'm going to assume, for my daughter, so it shouldn't be acceptable for any of you, nor is this. So I'm just asking if you are that concerned about safety, which you clearly are, I expect that all of you too. So I just wanted to say that. I mean, I go to the gym. I keep this thing on for an hour and a half. I fully expect everybody else to do the same. So anyway, okay, so what I'm really here to talk about, and I just put clubs on there, but I should have been a little bit more specific. Last week and this evening, Dr. Bailey stated that they had a partial reset of athletics, and that you were investigating which of your clubs would run virtually and how that might work. I'm here to talk about 3 clubs in particular that run and function a little differently that will affect my daughter. And those are the Jazz Club, the Harmonics, and Drama. Those clubs are not commonly held during 10th period like some other clubs are. These are more similar to the sports clubs and activities where the students have their transportation provided by family. And what I want you to do is when you're making these decisions about clubs, please think of these 3 clubs a little differently. They cannot function virtually. I'm sure that if you ask our lovely music teacher what it's like, and I've already talked to my daughter about this. What's it like doing music when you're 12 feet apart? What's it like singing when you're 12 feet apart? And this is her life. This is what she's going to do for the rest of her life. It is her passion. And when you take away something that a kid loves, we've all talked about their mental and social, they socially need that. The psychological impact of not having that is huge. We have such an amazing group of talented students here that perform in harmonics and jazz and drama. And I know that we are following the state laws that change constantly, and I know that we follow the CDC guidelines, but I also know that we are creative, and I think that we could come up with something that would work, and I ask you to please, please, please consider that when you're thinking about clubs, and keep an open mind about how that will impact those kids, because
drama kids are different than a lot of other kids. And some of those kids, this is their only outlet. It's the only way that they can express themselves. So it's really important. And I thank you for your time. Have a great night.
Okay, thank you. Upcoming activities, Audit Finance Committee meeting, October 16th at 9 a.m. Next BOE meeting will be October 21st. There's, what? Correct. Executive session, we do not need. Motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Engel, Mr. McFerrin, all in favor? Aye.